Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Laura Benegatti, and I am the co-founder and CEO of the ArtBound Initiative program. ArtBound Initiative is a program that connects students and recent graduates with creative companies in order to access the creative industries. We have a program that is really 360, offering some courses, a guaranteed internship as part of our program, and then a community, a network, and a lot of support. I'll introduce that a little bit, but it's in this mission that we're trying to organize as many events and insider talks and just trying to not gatekeep this industry because it's not an easy industry to get in. So, trying to make sure that we get you, people that are going to tell you what it is and that are going to give you a bit of an insider perspective. So, today we're super happy to have Aidan, who's actually one of our who's one of our alumni, one of our former participants, and who's now working at CBS. So I'll just explain a little bit first how the event is going to go. So, we're just going to have a very chill and casual, fireside chat with Aidan, and I really want to encourage you to ask him tons of questions about, how he got there, CBS, entertainment industry, anything you can think of. So we'll start with that. We'll talk to Aidan a little bit about his job, about the industry, and then in the middle, I'll do a program introduction for about 10 minutes, just so that you all know who ArtBound Initiative is. For my participants who are currently here, you all know what it is because you're in it, so you'll bear with us for 10 minutes on that. And then afterwards, we'll come back to a Q&A and to do more questions for Aidan. And of course, if you have questions for us as well, we'll do that. So Aidan, joined our program in 2020, back in the day. Was it before or after COVID? It was after COVID or before COVID? It was before
It
COVID.
was before COVID, but I did my internship just as the world started to lock down. So perfect timing for me.
Yeah, exactly. And then Aidan was actually doing that as a student at the time. You were a student at Swinburne University in Melbourne. And we placed you at the time with CBS on the show The Inside Edition. And then Aidan came back to Australia after that to finish his degree. And then little did I know, a couple of years later, I get a phone call from Aidan telling me like, hey, guess what? I'm back in New York and now I'm working full time for CBS. So obviously you'll tell us how you pulled that off and how you're working now and what your job is about. So let me just stop sharing my screen. Aidan, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you.
That's all right. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Hopefully I
so
could be a little bit of a help. Yeah.
I'm sure you will. So maybe tell us a little bit, obviously I gave a very short introduction, but tell us a little bit about, your career journey, like, what did you study in university? Perhaps like a bit of your time about the program and how you ended up like getting this full-time gig at CBS. You've been there for like what, 2 years now at least?
It's coming up on 3 years in June. So yeah, it's been a little while already. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us.
Um, yeah. Okay. So well, at university, I was at Swinburne University in Melbourne, Australia. And basically in the middle of my second year, it was a 4 year degree. I stumbled upon ArtBound. I was doing a film and television degree at university, and it's only second year, so it was still pretty early on, relatively. Still trying to figure out, what I really enjoyed, what I wanted to do, and it was kind of midway through the second year. Found out about ArtBound. I think a lecturer may have sent it to like all of us as an email, and I was like, oh well, this sounds like, this sounds a little bit too good to be true. This is kind of like the perfect opportunity. And I was never the type to, I'm not a super reserved person, but at the time I wasn't very like, oh, I want to travel overseas or I desperately want to get out into the workplace. I was really just enjoying university and kind of sitting back and enjoying my degree and really trying to take it slow. But then the opportunity sort of came up there, and I sort of thought to myself, well, this is a bit of a program. It's kind of hard to get into, but like, why don't I give it a go, see what happens, see what it's about. So I went along to an info night, sort of similar to what you're all at right now, and found out a little bit about the program. Joined, and it was a bit of a process because they don't just take anyone. It's not you can't just get thrown overseas immediately. So it takes a little while, but it's a great program. I really enjoyed it. And they placed me at CBS in New York City with a TV show called Inside Edition. anyone outside of the US probably hasn't heard of it. And if you're inside the US, the way I always describe it is your grandmother probably watches the show because it has a slightly older watch base. But it's a great show to work on. And I was really lucky to be placed there. So, November of 2019, I finished I think it was the day after I submitted my last assignment. I flew out to New York City all by myself, never done any traveling by myself before. Came over here, put my life in Laura and ArtBound's hands, basically, and came all the way over here. And it was one of the greatest experiences I've ever had. And it was, like I said, it was perfectly timed. I left just before COVID really shut the world down.
Yeah.
But I arrived in New York City and went straight to work. And I guess I can say a little bit about my time at the internship.
Yeah.
It was so I did a 4 month internship. It was full time because it was in Australia, your summer break is November through to February. So I was last day of my second year final assignment all the way just before the start of third year. So I used my entire break to just be here in New York City and work and learn. And it was a super massive eye opener. One, because, I sort of came into the degree of film and television. It's a creative industry. And creative industry jobs are not easy to get. You have to be super on top of things, super talented, super hardworking. And then on top of that, it's never usually great pay or great benefits or anything like that. But, depending on what you sort of find yourself falling into, you can, do really anything in the industry. I've met all sorts of people who are doing the wildest things, and people getting paid really well to do the funkiest things. But it's tough. It's not easy at all. But the helping hand of ArtBound really did help me in that initial push. So let's see. The internship 4 months, yeah, it was great. I went in super scared, super terrified immediately. I thought I've only done 2 years of this degree. I'm not like super skilled in anything specific yet. I've really tried my hand at a lot of things, but I didn't know what to expect. I never done journalism specifically, and it's a news program. And I really thought, this could be really anything, or I'm terrified. What if they think I'm really bad, or I've just come all the way here just to be a disappointment or anything like that. All those thoughts sort of go rushing through your head.
Right.
But I hit the ground running, I think, and just try to ask a lot of questions, try and learn as much as I could, because at the internship, where you're there to help other people, you're there to be helpful to the company, but also at the same time, you're trying to learn as much as you can. It's great experience for you. So I just sort of put all those fears aside and said, you know what, even if I'm useless here, I can learn a lot, which is great. And that's what I was here for. I didn't fly all the way from Melbourne to New York, which is a very long flight or two,
Yeah.
just to do nothing. So I really took the opportunity as best I could, and learned quite a bit in the period. Even though I was just a 20-year-old college student, I was trying my hardest to build relationships with these people and find out
Right.
about their stories. What were they doing in the industry? How did they come up? Because you'd think you're annoying all these people by asking them these questions, but really everyone wants to share, and everyone wants to talk about themselves all the time. So
Right.
it's super easy to learn from these people. That's something I did pick up from Laura. Is that she always said that to me. It was like, people want to talk about themselves. It's surprising you don't think it, because you never think that you want to do it, but people really do.
Yeah.
So it was really crucial in that early stage to just like talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and just learn things from people. Not necessarily like the work you were doing specifically, but I think those initial like key relationships I built was super crucial.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. So that was like for 4 months, you basically worked during the internship and you were kind of like networking and doing everything you could during those 4 months to
Yeah.
like get to know, as many people as possible, right? And then what happens after those 4 months? Basically, you're coming back to school, right? Because you were still in university technically.
Yeah. Well, that was a rough time, because it was, I'd done this amazing 4 months in New York. I was working really hard during the week, and I was in a brand new country, in a brand new city. So I was really having so much fun of those 4 months. Outside of work, I was trying all this new stuff and going out and having fun. And and exploring the city. And at the end of the 4 months, it was tough, but I had to, say goodbye, and head back. And before I left, it was super important. I picked up everyone's emails, LinkedIn's, Instagrams, really like shot in there, got the connections, confirmed them. And I lined myself up some pretty nice things. Like funnily enough, the CBS owns Network 10 back home. So I had, through the intern coordinator at work, her boss knew some people from Melbourne. So I had lined up a chat with those people, which was amazing. And I didn't know how that was even possible. And that was incredible. And then I left and I got back and it was March of 2020. And that was a little bit rough, if ever remembers that hilarious period of time. So all that stuff sort of got thrown out the door. That meeting that I had lined up disappeared,
Yeah.
and went back to university, but it was all online. And it really took this. I was very motivated, and I was I'd come out of this internship. I come into this internship really really laid back and really like, what, like I'm just going to enjoy myself and have fun. But over that 4 months and working and being in the industry, it really reinvigorated me for like why I was doing my degree and why I was trying to pursue this. Because university is like this big tunnel that you're heading down, and
Yeah.
you can't really see the light at the end of the tunnel when you're going through. But just an internship is so eye-opening, and I was so motivated at the end. And then just COVID came through and wiped out all that motivation. So I had to really work that back. But I'm sure everyone went through sort of a similar thing.
Right. For
Yeah.
sure. For sure. And you spent how long? So you were back for like 2 years in Melbourne or 1 year?
Yeah, so Melbourne, I saw a few people who said they were from Melbourne as well. You'll remember we were locked down for 2 whole years, which was crazy, and I can't even remember that time very well. But I'd done 2 years of my degree. I did the internship right in the middle, and then the final 2 years I finished all basically online, working from home and doing university from home. And then was very burnt out at the end of that. I finished my degree end of 2021. um, and I sort of sat down with myself and I said, you know what, I'm very very burnt out. That was a very difficult final year, especially with the mix of online and stuff like that. So I said to myself, you know what, I'm going to give myself a gap year, because I worked really hard, because I did 4 years. I took an entire summer off to go do this internship, overseas, which was a great experience. But and then into COVID was all this, it was all this stuff building up of just, not taking a break. So I thought to myself, I'm going to step back, take a 6 months or a year, and just, work at my silly part-time job and just relax, and then figure out what I want to do from there.
Fair enough.
Um, yeah. And that kind of, I spent a few months doing that. And then I think um, around April of 2022, maybe a little bit earlier, um, then I sort of started to think about, okay, I've had fun, I'm enjoying myself, but I got to start ramping up and thinking about things. And then I guess I'll go on and talk about how I ended up coming back.
Yeah.
So obviously I'd finished this degree in Melbourne, Australia, and the industry, the film and television industry in Australia is improving, but it's not, it's not fantastic. So it's really hard to break in. I mean, the creative industry is hard to break in
In
as it
general.
is, let alone in Australia, specifically for film and television. So I had a few friends who were already started to work, but they were, they were all very talented and had really pushed themselves quite hard throughout school, and were making connections that whole time. And I felt like I had sort of stepped back over COVID and really like focused straight on university, because I didn't want to, flunk out or anything like that, or like, burn myself out working and doing that. Um, and I sort of hit that point. I thought, what connections do I have right now? I have a few people in Melbourne here, but those were leads from ages ago, and I was trying to connect with them, but lockdown and stuff got in the way for me. So I thought to myself, do I see myself going back to New York and seeing what avenues happen down there? Because um, that was an opportunity I had. And when I left, I very much said, uh-huh, in 2 years' time, if it's possible, like let me know if there's anything. And so that was the point. I reached out to a couple people. One was a guy who I'd done the internship with, because you hang out with the other interns basically the whole time. And he was already working at the show. He'd been brought on a year earlier at that point. So he was a great resource initially, and that was just, a key relationship you built. You think to yourself, you want to impress that people higher up, but also, there's the people on the same level as you who,
That's right.
they want to build you up at the same time. They want to come up with you. They don't want to shoot up by themselves. So he was a great resource, and then also, that led me to reconnecting with other people and getting on emails and calls with people, and then just all of a sudden it sort of became like a case of, oh yeah, we're looking for someone to take a position, like an entry level position here. We know you're good. Would you like to come back? And I sort of said, oh, well, that's, very kind. I wasn't desperately seeking for a job or anything like that, but I was just sort of exploring my avenues. And they said that, and I said, well, obviously I'm, quite far away. How quickly do I have to arrive? How quickly do I have to be there? And he said, it kind of depends on you, but the sooner the better. And I said, does 6 weeks sound okay? And he said yes. He said see you there. Like
Wow.
I'll see you on Monday, June 6th or whatever it was. And he said, come on down. And I said, okay. So I kind of packed up my life in 6 weeks, which was crazy and fun and, insane. And I'd asked my parents, I said, oh, is this a good opportunity? Should I really go and just pick up my life and move overseas for who knows how long? And both my parents, who had done this when they were my age, both my parents had moved from the UK to Australia. They both said, we can't make this decision for you. You kind of have to make it yourself. We're not
Right.
going to say anything. And then when I told them I decided to do it, they both said, well, that's the correct answer. Well done. You should definitely do it. And so I picked up my life. 6 weeks later, I was in New York, and then just jumped straight back into work as a production runner. So right at the bottom of the rung, basically the same as an intern, but that is a foot in the door, and that is all you need. Like a foot in the door is crazy, because then from there, boom, you can swing it right open.
Everything's open, everything opens, right? And Aidan, I have more questions for you, but there's already so many questions in the chat, so I want to go through
Oh
some of
wow.
them. But one quick question for you before I open it up to the chat, if you can answer briefly for me, what's your job right now? Like, explain very briefly to us what you're doing, what it means, so that we can understand.
Okay, so I'll quickly. So when I got in, I was a production runner. Then a few months in, I was promoted to work in the dub room, which is sort of our ingest room at work. So we take in a lot of footage because we're a news program. So we have a whole room dedicated to that, basically, and that's where I went into. And then from there, I started training as a playback operator. And so they basically record and live edit the show.
Yeah.
Because we're a daily show, so that happens every day. So I started training doing that, and then a position opened up, so I moved in there permanently. And then from there, I started learning how to edit for the show at work. I'd done a lot of editing at university, but I really wanted to learn how to do it professionally. And so I got one of the editors at work to start teaching me, and I started shadowing her, basically as soon as I was working full time there, because during the show I was working the whole time, but in the lead up to the show, I would get there at 9 a.m. and the show wasn't until 3. So I didn't really have anything to do for most of the day. So I had all this spare time to learn and try
Right.
new things. And that was the big thing. And then from there, I started editing 2 segments a week, our sponsored segments. So they're pretty cut and dry. They're the cut and paste, sorry. So they're pretty consistent to do. So I started doing those. And then from there, they started trusting me with daily pieces for the show.
Wow.
And then from there, it's been kind of crazy. Some editors would take time off, and then they'd pull me in for a day. And then some of the editors have been on maternity leave, because we have 8 full time in rotation, and so
Yeah.
people take days off, that sort of thing. So they would pull me in quite a bit. And for the last 8 or 9 months, it's been mostly every day. So my role sort of turned into this hybrid playback operator and video editor for the show. So I'm kind of doing 2 roles at once, which is great, because they're paying me extra for doing the extra bit. So my bank
Love
account's
that.
looking great, but also at the same time I'm doing 2 completely different things, which is great for learning new things and gaining all these skills. Sorry, that
That's
wasn't super brief, but
no, it's great. I think just for people to have context. So I have tons of
yeah.
questions. You all, I'm going to try to get to all of them if I can. So Lishana is asking, like, which aspect of the internship application process did you find the most difficult? When I guess when we pushed you forward at the time, with CBS. I don't know if Lishana is referring to our program or to CBS directly. Was it the portfolio building? Was it writing the essays, the interviews? Basically, do you have any tips, for students or fresh grads in terms of preparing, either for the application or the internship itself?
That's a great question. I would say really make sure you know what you want to do. I wasn't too sure, so that wasn't super helpful for ArtBound for finding me something specific to my interests. But I gave them as much as I could, and I said, you know what, I'm really flexible. I'd love to just learn as much as possible, and they placed me somewhere where I really could because our show is daily, so it's pre-production, production, and post-production all in one day. So it really was a mix of everything. So I definitely say make sure you know what you want to do, or at least have a vague idea of what you'd like to explore. Because, a lot of people do 3 or 4 year university degrees. You don't just have to do one internship, but you can try different things. If you do one internship and you go, you know what, it was interesting, but it's not really for me. That's great because then now you don't want to do that. So then you can move on to the next internship and say, well, I kind of like this aspect of that, or I'd like to explore this thing now, for your specific chosen field. And then you can try an internship in that, because you can learn as much as you like at university. You can really try things, but really working is kind of the most crucial way you're going to learn if you really like something or not. And we're all, I assume everyone's sort of in a creative industry or field, or even if you're not, you want to be passionate about what you do, because you don't want to work for 40, 50 years of your life and then not enjoy what you're doing. I go to work when I was at university and I worked a part-time job in a supermarket. I would dread going into work some days because I think, oh, this is so dull. I really don't want to do this. But I've worked at this company for 3 years and I have never had a day where I was like, oh, I don't want to go in at all today. I have no problem getting into work because I really enjoy what I do.
And I love what you said about the internships, like the selection process. Internships are there for a selection process, right? To kind of understand what you want to do, what you don't want to do. And it's perfectly
Yeah.
fine to do internships and being like, you know what, been there, done that, don't love it. Let's move on to the next. Takes me to the question from Kevin, who said, what would be some advice that you would give to someone who's going through their first internship? So I think you did well. You talked a little bit about that perhaps, but maybe talk a bit more about like how you managed to build all those relationships, right? Because that was
Yeah.
good advice. Yeah.
Well, that's a great thing. I mean, everyone always says networking is super key, and you think, oh no, it's so awkward having this active networking or asking people for favors. It's not really what networking is. Networking is just building connections with people, and whether that's some sort of like workplace friendship or some sort of working relationships. You don't have to actively go out and be like, oh, please add me on LinkedIn desperately. I want to, find out everything I can through you immediately. You can just ask them questions and build a normal relationship. And, if you're intriguing and, you're asking the right questions and you're being respectful, people really remember you. You stick out because you're trying, but also you're not trying too hard. You're not desperately like pleading for them. You're just being very normal and having a nice conversation with someone. And that's so overlooked when it comes to things like this. You just need to have a normal conversation, talk to people, build up those relationships naturally, and you'll find that they're easier to make. It's slow building. It doesn't just happen immediately. You don't just boom have 5,000 connections on LinkedIn and job offers coming through the window. But it's laying the groundwork for stuff that's going to happen later down the track. I had a conversation with one of the other editors, and he said we were talking about what else is out there right now in the job market, because he was saying that he didn't know if he wanted to stay for much longer. And he was saying, it's crazy, like all the different jobs I've had, bar one, have all been through connections because, someone just said, oh, are you looking for something right now? Or, we need someone on right now, stuff like that, where it's like people who are hiring down the track, they might go, oh, I remember this person.
Yeah.
Let's see if they're available, that sort of thing. It's just stuff like that where you're just laying down the groundwork for these relationships.
I love that. And I'm the same, by the way. All my first 7 years of my career were always like jobs that I got. I never had to show a resume. Once I got in, getting in is hard. But once you're in, like if you navigate well, you're good. So I have a question from Daniela, and I think you answered it a little bit, but maybe some other pointers. Like, what do you think was the key factor that helped you secure the job? And how can you ensure that you leave a lasting impression on the company? Obviously, you talked about one part of it, which is like making sure that you're in, that you're talking to people, that you're front of mind? Anything else? Any other advice that you can share?
Well, for me, some of the big hurdles were out of the way. So I'm actually an American and Australian citizen, so I was luckily didn't have to worry too much about visas.
Right.
And I'd saved up quite a bit over COVID, so I was able to come back quite easily. Those big roadblocks were out of my way, which was really great. In terms of leaving a lasting impression, you can try as hard as you can at something, and you can be perceived one way or another from some people, and it's kind of hard to gauge how well you're liked or whatever. And that's an age old question, but I think just really try and be yourself and try and just have a good time, because you're working with these people, but also you're spending 8 hours a day with them. You don't want to just be working all the time and being super serious. You want to, relax, have fun at the same time. So, you know, try and be yourself, try and be a bit natural, still professional, of course. But try and enjoy yourself at work and try and enjoy being, having fun with people around you. And you've made friends in your life by having fun and meeting like-minded people. Everyone who works with you is working in the same industry. You have quite a lot in common already. You can build relationships quite easily. It's again, it comes back to that case of not everything has to be active. It's just you can go in with the expectation of I'm going to be myself. I'm going to try and have fun. I'm going to try and do some good work. And these sort of things will build up naturally for you. You're not going to gel well with everyone at work. I think we've got 100 employees at the show. I don't gel well with everyone, of course, but I gel well with most people because I work hard, but also I have fun. I crack jokes. I don't toe the line, of course, but I try and make an enjoyable experience working with me. Each day I'm editing. I have a producer and a production assistant sitting right behind me when we're editing the piece. While we're still going, I'm working right in front of them, but also, I'm also cracking jokes. I'm saying like, oh, isn't this funny? Or what do you think we can do this? Oh no, that's silly. Just stuff like that.
Yeah.
Just being
Interpersonal.
yourself, just having fun.
Yeah, interpersonal relationships, right? And like really building, like you got to work on both performing really well, but also like just never forgetting about those relationships that you're building and like how you're kind of moving forward with the internship. So I love that. I have one last question and then I want to introduce the program as well. And then I'm going to come back to all your questions because there's so many great questions that I didn't go to. But I think a question that a lot of people are kind of having in mind, doing an internship in New York. Jasmine is asking, how did you manage finances like with your work, during your internship in New York? I think you were, I think your internship was paid, if I recall, or
Mine was luckily, yeah, which was very, very helpful. But I was preparing, ArtBound did set expectations quite well.
yes.
I was prepared to have to pay out of pocket that whole time. New York City's one of the most expensive cities on the planet. But there's always ways to save. It's move in with roommates. Save costs where you can. Don't eat out every single night, that sort of thing. And I'd also saved up quite a bit beforehand. I was in a lucky position to be living at home still over COVID and being able to still work. So I was still earning money. So it's about saving up and preparing for that. ArtBound's not a program where you go in and boom, 2 weeks later you're going to be thrown on the other side of the planet. You got time for this stuff, and if you plan ahead, and you really think about it and you really plan for it, you can manage yourself quite well. I was lucky to be paid, but I was super prepared to not have to. Super prepared to have to fork out everything for myself.
Right,
And
right.
yeah, there's ways around it. There's ways to save money. I'm not the best at saving money, but I manage. I manage.
Well, I that's a good transition to talk a little bit about like, the program. And definitely, I think what Aidan mentioned is that he got, he was fortunate to get a paid internship, but as he knows, we had prepared him that this is not something that we can guarantee on our end, obviously. But I think, if you want to be interning in big cities like New York, you got to be resourceful. And we give also a lot of advice in terms of budgeting too, because You got to find a way to make it work. I've been there as well, like back in my days, and specifically in those industries, sometimes you start unpaid, sometimes you start very low pay as well. So it's like, how about, how do you kind of figure out a way to, to really organize yourself very well until you, but it gets better. I do want to say that it gets better eventually, in that like there are, it's not true that you're going to be broke all your life in the creative fields. Like you can eventually make good careers, make good money, just takes a little bit more time than if you were studying engineering or finance. Let's just be real on that. So let me just introduce briefly the program for 10 minutes, just because, I want you all to understand who we are as well. And for my participants and my alumni here, just bear with me. And by the way, you might see a lot of changes because Aidan, the program changed a lot since you did it. So our program is a global career accelerator for creatives. As I mentioned before, what we do is that we connect students and fresh grads with creative companies in the industry. We have different destinations, different program types that we offer. We have 3 programs in the US, New York, Chicago, and LA. We've got 2 programs in Europe, London and Berlin, and then 2 programs in Australia, Melbourne and Sydney. And then we also have a virtual program in case you are in other cities and you don't necessarily have the funds to be relocating, but you still want to be doing an internship. Post-COVID world now, a lot of companies are remote anyway. So in terms of the internship types that we have, we're very focused on creative industries. We don't do anything else. So entertainment and media, obviously, things like what Aidan did in production, film, TV content, script, music, photography, etc. We have also opportunities in design, opportunities in marketing and advertising, in the fine arts world, in the fashion world. So I invite you, if you are interested in the program, to look through our website, to look a bit at the laundry list of all those internship types to understand what we're doing. In terms of like just some examples of, company partners that, we've worked with, because CBS, by the way, we don't work with CBS anymore. I do want to disclaim that, since COVID, they've tightened things up a lot more in terms of their internship programs. I'm sure, Aidan, you might have some questions about this at one point. But, we have, I would say like the majority of the companies that we work with are actually more like mid-sized firms, boutique firms, which are honestly great for you to begin your career because you're getting a lot more exposure and you're then building your profile to be able to tap into the bigger guys like CBS. So, examples of Cadence Film, production company in New York, where you have opportunities in film and content production. Example of Picture North in Chicago, who did a lot of the ads for the Super Bowl this year, doing some post-prod and production internships. Example in LA for Factory PR, which is an advertising and PR agency, where you have opportunities in marketing, social, PR, accounts. And Friends, content production agency in London, with opportunities both in production and also design, social media. Studio Aventin, a creative agency in Berlin, where you have opportunities in design, motion, content. So, just a few examples. Collider production studio in Sydney, with opportunities in design, content, production. And then Milkman, who I think you probably have heard of at one point, Aidan, who's one of our close agency partners in Melbourne. Opportunities in like account management, marketing, copywriting, design, etc. So just wanted to give you a bit of like a sample of some companies. So there's 4 key elements into our program. The first one is the ABI Academy, and that's what changed a lot since you did it, Aidan, because it wasn't there in that format. So the ABI Academy is an online course that you're undertaking, which is you can do on top of your classes, and it's all about entering the workforce 101, pretty much all the stuff that like you're not learning enough and that you're having to be confronted with, we talk about, and I'll explain it a little bit. The second part is that you get a guaranteed internship placement. We set you up, we send your profile to companies until we'll line you up with an offer. And that's, something that we arrange if you get it accepted, of course, because there's an application process. And then the third aspect is the network that we offer. And obviously you can see with our alumni like Aidan, I see also several of our alumni and our participants here on this call, like we're a pretty close knit community, and we try to support each other as well because everybody's growing together. And then the last part is the support that we offer to our participants to be relocating, to be going places. So the Academy, and yeah, Aidan, that changed a lot. You can see this is our new platform. Like back in the days when you did it, it was like one-on-one sessions. It was a lot more like I guess lo-fi, now we've like upgraded as much as we could. So it's basically a course where you have two big components. The first part of it is for your preparation of your profile. So basically, we're teaching you how to interview with senior recruiters. You're getting resume feedback from resume writers. You're getting portfolio feedback from professionals and seniors in the industry. And you're basically learning everything on how to pitch yourself and how to prepare for the recruitment process, which is good for your internship, but just later on in your career as well. And then the second part is all about the internship readiness. You're joining a bunch of live sessions with industry experts. You're with groups. It's actually group sessions to like talk to professionals, talk to recruiters about, the industry that you're targeting, about how to find jobs after the program, and really how to also handle hardships, because internships might be great, but they might also suck. Let's be real about that, right? It might also be like a moment where you're having the best time of your life, and then afterwards, two weeks later, suddenly you're feeling really terrible, demotivated, and burnt out. Like those are realities of the workforce. And so we're really trying to prepare you for those so that you're equipped to be able to handle it. Those are examples of some of our industry experts. We've got senior execs from Warner Brothers. We've got people from MTV Paramount, from Omnicom, from Ralph Lauren, from Shutterstock, senior recruiters. So we're trying to have, like, as part of our coaches, people that have been for a while in the industry and that can really help you navigate it. The second part of the program is the guaranteed internship placement. So, that's obviously a perk. Our internships are ranging from 3 to 6 months. They're throughout the year. You can do it part-time or full-time, specifically if it's for locals. If you're doing US in US or Australia in Australia, for example, that's not a problem. And it can be for academic credit or for experience, you choose. So as Aidan mentioned, we do prepare you all to say that, we cannot guarantee that the internship is going to be paid. That's the big caveat of the program. As much as I wish I could be in this world where all the internships would be paid, we're just not there yet. And with or without the program, that's a problem that you'll have to deal with. So if an unpaid internship is a deal breaker, I 100% understand, but this is not the right program for you to join at this stage, right? Just want to be real about that. We do have a really good conversion rate for our local participants. Obviously, Aidan is one of them. 60% of our participants who do that as seniors or fresh grads are actually ended up with a job after the internship. So we're very proud of that. So, we have a lot of company partners, as I mentioned. Those are some of the bigger names that we've had. But as I said, we also have a lot of really cool boutique and mid-sized firms as well that we work with. If you're relocating overseas, just like what Aidan did, right? He went from Melbourne to New York. We handle visa processing, insurance, housing. We meet you upon arrival. We have on-site support. Like that's a whole kind of system to help you, because relocating is a hustle. I've done it. I think Aidan, you've done it as well. It is not the easiest thing. So we're helping on that side of things, of course. And then on top of that, we're very hands-on with our participants, where we offer, basically support throughout the entire time, from the onboarding to setting up interviews to helping you with the recruitment, with resume, with portfolios, with the visa, everything. And then once you get into the city, we're also, doing events and organizing that. So the last part of the program for me, which is the most important part, is the creative community that we offer. And that's, we have our own app basically, which is a lifetime access if you get into the program. And that's our own LinkedIn. Everybody's in there. Everybody's got their profile segmented by industry, so you can see who's who. You can connect with people. We're organizing a lot of events just like this one for our alumni who are joining and our participants who are joining. We're sending every month job boards and just, really trying to lift everybody up as much as we can so that everybody's growing together. That's in our interest too. Examples, Aidan, there you go. Examples of like, some of our alumni that ended up going into big companies like, June at Apple, Indira at NBC, Aidan obviously at CBS, Carlos at Saatchi & Saatchi, which is one of the largest, advertising agencies worldwide. Another Aidan at Netflix. The Aidans are doing well in entertainment. I don't know what's up with that, but Sylvia at Google, we have actually a talk with her not too long ago in, I think in a week or two. Jay at TikTok, and Anastasia at L'Oreal. Those are just examples, but, we have a lot of people who end up going freelance as well. Some didn't doing their own businesses. And so that's the community that you can tap into, which is super important. So let's talk a bit about, how to apply. If you go to our website, you'll have to submit an application form. We'll then go through an interview process. You'll get, our team letting you know if you've been accepted or not. And then, of course, if you're accepted, you can make your final decision whether you want to join. The deadline, we have an upcoming deadline coming through, which is May 10. We have deadlines every month on the 10. The next deadline, if you are in Australia, I saw a lot of people that were in Melbourne. If you are in Australia and you want to go overseas, you need to be applying by May 10. Ideally, our latest cutoff is June 10 for you for your summer, which is November, right? Okay, so be mindful of that. As Aidan mentioned, it's a program that you have to apply to if you go overseas very much in advance. It's not a last minute thing. I saw a lot of people from the US here as well. We are already closed for the US for summer, which means like May, June, July, August internships already closed, but May 10 will be our deadline for the fall if you want to do something for the fall. So yeah, everybody's like, we're so global. I saw people from all over. So just wanted to give you some guidelines. So in terms of next steps, and that's my last slide. If you want to check if you're eligible, because there is eligibility requirements, go on our website with and verify your eligibility. You can then apply on our website. And if you want to join our next talk, we have actually, do you know Sylvia, Aidan? I don't know if you've met Sylvia before.
I don't think so, no.
Sylvia, I think Sylvia was right after you because like she was right
Ah.
after COVID. So anyway, Sylvia, who did an internship as well in New York, ended up going back to Milan and now works, now is actually the country manager for arts and culture at Google. So like pretty badass job as well. So we'll be talking to her as well about like, her insights on, how she got into this basically. So I'm going to stop sharing now just to kind of make sure we go back to our questions. And of course, if you have questions about the program too, we can answer them obviously. So Aidan, coming back to you, obviously I love how you leverage the program. I think you're like such a success story for us because, you've basically and obviously we opened the door, but you made it happen, right? For yourself. Like not everybody then gets, you need to work for it, right? It's not like, you're getting in, but then afterwards the job is not done. So Kevin's asking, like, what's some piece of advice that significantly impacted your work or your career? I think that's a really great question.
Um, well, getting in the door again, like I've said, those key relationships. But I definitely think a really important thing for my career has been um, just sort of progress. The way I've been really pushing to move up at work. I've been really lucky that people have left and there's been positions to open up. But I've really pursued things I've really wanted to try. And the job I have right now is really great because I wouldn't consider myself entry level at this point, but I was, and there was positions available to move further up at work, and that's not always the case, depending on where the global market is or where even your individual company is. There's not always room to move up. So, you get as much as you can out of work. And I think I've said this like twice, maybe at some point, but I've said like, oh, if there's not more opportunity at some point, I'll look elsewhere. But then, opportunity has cropped up. So I've stayed because, there's more avenues for me to explore. So it kind of feels like a new job. But never be afraid to look elsewhere and to think to yourself, oh, I really want to try this. I've got my door in here. I've got my foot in the door here, but I really want to try something else. There's ways to gain those skills outside of work and start pushing towards that. So I'd always say, make sure you know what you're doing and that you're enjoying what you're doing, and don't be afraid to turn around and say, you know what, I want to move on to something else now. I want to try something different, because that's been pretty crucial for me, because I don't want to get bored at work. I don't want to be, monotonous and be doing the same thing for 20 years. It's fine for some people, but I really want to be doing different things all the time and trying out new things. So I found it really crucial to make sure I know I have this path moving forward at all times.
I love that. And actually that takes me to the question of Austin, who had a few questions about like, what's next for you? Like, are you planning to go back to a degree? Like, is there anything else that you want to be doing next? And Austin is also asking if you have a public social media page, which I'm guessing is going to be your LinkedIn at this stage, right? Which we can share at the end.
Yeah, probably my LinkedIn. I'll share it at the end. Next for me, I mean, this is just a personal plan, but I always said to myself when I was at university that, you know what, if I finish my degree and I try the workforce for a little while and I don't enjoy it, I think I set 28 for myself, because I'm 25 now, and I said to myself, you know what, at 28, if I'm not enjoying it or I'm not really pursuing it or it's not for me anymore, I'm going to go back to university at 28. So that's still on the horizon, but right now it seems like I'm really enjoying myself and I'm
Yeah.
really loving the industry. So it doesn't look like that's going to be that's going to be what I'm going to be doing. But I'm always looking for new opportunities and looking what's out there. I've been at this one workplace for 3 years and I'm really enjoying myself. I really love working there. But I'm always looking around because I didn't just move all the way here to just do one job. I want to see what else is out there. So I'm always looking around. I'm always you know trolling all over LinkedIn and job posting boards just to see where the market's at and see what other people are doing, and trying to connect with other people and see what they're doing and maybe something will crop up. But I'm not in any rush to run out the door or anything like that, but it's always healthy to be looking around and it's very easy to be very confined at work and seeing what just everyone at your work is doing. But it's really great to meet people across the industry and try and reach out a little bit just to again back to that networking stuff,
Yeah.
just dabbling a little bit, having these really calm relationships just to be polite and respectful and find things out. But stuff crops up.
For sure. And most likely, like your editor was saying, like probably your next job will be also through a connection. That's my guess. Probably not through
Probably, yeah.
probably not through LinkedIn, but I think that's great to hear a little bit more about your perspective. Lishana is asking, how did your university experience provide a foundation for you to upskill in your career? If it did help, she asks.
At the time when I was at university, I think I felt like it didn't, but in retrospect, it definitely has. I went to, I think I said before, I did a film and television degree at Swinburne, and it was a very broad program for the first 2 years. Like it was really great in that aspect that you could try a bit of everything to see what you really geared towards because film and television is quite broad. There's a lot of different departments and a lot of different skills you can pick up there. And I picked up a sort of had a jack of all trades sort of thing there, and I learned quite a bit of different things, and then gravitated towards some like production and also editing and videography as well. So that was sort of those avenues really helped set up foundations for what I ended up doing in my career. I learned a little bit of editing at university. I had a bit of background knowledge from high school, and then improved at university, but I didn't focus on it too heavily. But then the opportunity popped up here, and I thought to myself, I really do like editing, and I want to see where this takes me. So I just shadowed under someone. I had the opportunity, took it, and I really enjoyed it. So it's just about you know expanding on the skills you kind of have, because you're not going to come out of university and be you're not going to be the craziest and most incredible person ever. You're entry level, you've just started out, no one's expecting you to be the most incredible person ever, but it's about trying your hardest and expanding upon the skills you got at university. But some people don't. Some people finish their degree and go into a job and they say, oh, nothing really helps me. But it's not always about individual skills. It's about it's about learning and making connections and different types of working. There's always skills you can bring in, but for the rest of even through your career as well, you'll constantly be expanding upon your skills, especially for creative industries as things move on and trends
Yeah.
change, that sort of thing. So you're always updating and you're always pushing forward. But university is great for a foundation.
For sure, for sure. And actually, Mona is asking, like, did you have any professional experience? I don't remember that actually. I forgot how your resume looked like when you applied to us. Forgive me, it was 5 years ago,
Yeah,
6 years
that's
ago.
okay.
So, did you have any professional experience before the internship, or
Um,
not?
Not specifically in a workplace. No, our degree was quite good at giving you very practical experience. So that's how I sort of built my resume there. And people can do this with your portfolios as well, as you can expand upon the work you've done at university. You can shift things, and I had done some films at mine, so I sort of said like, look, this is what I worked on here at university. It's quite
Yeah,
professional looking. It's the same thing with everyone else with your portfolios. You shift it around and you design your resume upon that. You don't have any relevant experience, but you actually do. Your work at university is relevant experience. You just got to turn that into something professional looking.
exactly. And by the way, on that topic, we have two upcoming workshops that I think would be of interest to you. There are also free workshops for you to come. We have one about structuring your resume. So exactly what Aidan is talking about, which is like when you don't have professional experience, like how to fake it till you make it and make sure not
Yeah.
it's not really fake it till you make it, but how to leverage what you've got to make it look, a lot more relevant. And then we also have, because I saw Mona had a question about your portfolio as well, like how did it look like? We also have an incredible workshop with a creative director about how to basically build a winning portfolio, talking about the structure, how to like basically impress recruiters with it. Those are two extremely important part, obviously, of the application. And it's, you know, it's not just, you know, because you got to pass that first section of getting an interview, right? That's the thing. Once you're on the interview, like for example, Aidan, you have great just interpersonal skills, you have a great personality, you can tell that like, you know, you'd be getting it. But like when you're anonymous and you're at the resume stage and the portfolio stage, like how are you able to impress, you know, specifically in competitive industries like that? So we have those two workshops. We can add some information about them as well, you know, if you'd like. I think I'll try to see if I can find, or I think I have my teammate Kenya here who can put in a link for those next events. So obviously more questions, sorry for you again. So James asking, do you have any tips for swinging the door wide open after you've gotten your foot in that door? I think we're still kind of like on the same kind of thematic a little bit, right? Which is like, so we talked about networking, right? And relationships. We talked about obviously performing as well. Is there anything else that you feel like sharing, or do you feel like you've kind of like talked through it all? Because I have a bunch of questions for you as well about CBS itself that I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say really quickly, again, like I said, yeah, the relationships and, just really trying to be yourself at work. But there was opportunities that cropped up for me in Melbourne just before the lockdown that I didn't end up taking because we were locked down, obviously. But after my internship at CBS, I sort of got this courage built up of, look, I've done something now. I can really take it and run. So if you haven't done an internship before, and especially if you're still at university, this is a really great program, and I'm gonna hype it up a little bit because it really did help me quite a lot. Was getting your foot in the door is really just that first internship, and from there you really have that professional experience. So Artbound's really great at just pushing you through that first hurdle because it is really difficult if you don't have these connections. Because, like I said, like these are very hard industries to break into, and
Yeah.
just prying it in with Artbound was fantastic for me. And just taking it from there, because then you've got some professional experience and you can either run with that at the company you're with or through connections through that company, or take it and run and go to these other companies and say, hey, look, I don't know if you offer internships, or looking at postings, that sort of thing, and see, hey, look, I've got this great experience and I'm still at university. Look how crazy I am. Because honestly, that looks great to some people, especially with smaller firms. They'll see that you've already got some experience. So you're very capable with this other company. So why don't we take you aboard? So it's really that steamrolling that first pry open, which Artbound is really great for, to then open up other opportunities for yourself. And like with me, I got the internship and then I came back to them and I said, look, I worked with you before.
What do
Would
you
you
have
like
for
to
me?
have me back? And it worked. And it's not
Yeah,
always with the same company you worked with, and there's other companies out there, but it's just about steamrolling that experience you have into the next thing. And that's kind of what I guess life is like, but I don't know for sure. But that's
I
my
love
experience at least.
And then I have a question from Steven that I missed. Sorry, is if you had to do the whole process over again, what would you do differently? Anything you wish you knew then? That's a really good question and a
um,
difficult one too.
I don't know. I think I had a really great experience for me. So I mean, I would do it all again the exact same way, probably. I mean, I think if COVID hadn't happened, I really think that I would have taken that first experience and try to roll it into more while I was still at university. So I don't know where everyone is at in terms of your degree, but the earlier you are on, you might still feel like, oh, I don't have that much experience, but you should still really try and get out there because you know, so many people go to university nowadays, and you're going to graduate with so many other people. You've got to have a way to stand out, and the way to stand out is experience and professionalism. And if you have this incredible resume, if you have this experience already, that's just going to push you through. So if COVID wasn't there for me, that's probably what I would have done differently. I probably would have really pushed to keep doing internships, probably in Melbourne for a while, and keep getting experience. If there was paid, unpaid, just anything. And just really try to push through that.
I like that. I like that. I think that's a great advice. And I always tell our participants and for all of you here, like just try to get as much as you can before you graduate, because the truth is, in this job market now, junior opportunities are like, they're like, oh, we're looking for junior opportunities, but really they want to see a few experiences already. It's very rare for companies now to hire juniors who are completely fresh and just have the degree. So with or without the program, regardless, like, you all should think about doing those internships before you graduate. I think it's a really important part. So Aidan, I thank you so much. It's already 57 now, so I'm guessing, I'm guessing that we won't have too much time, but I have one last question. Run us through really briefly, like, CBS, just I know, sorry, in 2 minutes, like, CBS, what
That's all
type
right.
of shows, like, what's up there, right? Because you're at the Inside Edition on your end, but like,
Yeah.
what are other shows that we might know of, or just giving us a bit more insight about the company?
So CBS is under the umbrella of Paramount. So you might have seen someone else there on the slideshow works for MTV, which is also under Paramount. So Paramount is sort of this global brand that you'll also know of. They do films. I think like Top Gun Maverick, stuff like that. I get emails all the time about the whole company saying, "Look how amazing we are." So they do films. They also have a lot of television programs, whether that's in the US or internationally. A lot of big name brands. We're a show that's been on the air for quite a long time. We're not like super huge named, but The Amazing Race, Survivor, shows like that are pretty popular. We have the Drew Barrymore show. What else I'm trying to think? I mean, CBS News as well, of course. Like we have local stations all around the country, and the major CBS News, CBS Mornings, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
So it's a large, pretty massive umbrella company. And Laura said, ArtBound doesn't work with CBS anymore, but CBS still has a page program as well. If you're in television, NBC does a page program. I think ABC also has a similar program here in the US.
yeah,
Whether that's I think here in New York as well. So there's always opportunities. Like if you want to desperately work for a specific company, you might not always get it, but you
try.
still might. There's always an opportunity somewhere for someone. So if you're really desperate for a certain opportunity, you can really try and gun for it. You might not get it, but also you might. So you might as well give it a chance. So if you're really desperate for something, go for it.
I love that. I love that. I think that's a perfect way for us to finish, because I want to be conscious of all your time, and I know some of you are calling us from the States, which is late already, including you, Aidan. Thank you so much for joining us from New York today. Um,
That's all right.
it was such a great session, you all. Thank you so much for being so engaged and for asking, like, just so many questions, to Aidan, and I think the fact that you all are here, you're already on the right path, because you're kind of going a bit out of your way to attend those types of events, to hear from industry professionals. So you're all you're all well on the way. You're already doing the right things by being in those types of things. So kudos to you, Aidan. Thanks so much for being real with us, for being generous, and not gatekeeping us, and telling us, how your journey was, the good and the bad. So we loved it. We love to have you, and
That's all
we're
right.
very
Thanks for
proud of
having me.
you on our end.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna drop my LinkedIn in the chat if anyone wants
Yes,
to
yes,
to
perfect.
go for that. Don't have to, of course, but it's always nice to connect with people. And if you have any questions, whether it's specific about my industry or the program, feel free to hit me up.
Love that. Thanks, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye, Aidan. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.